Located in the Austrian region, Amstetten was a small town long known for its quiet nature. With its narrow streets, orderly houses, and low crime rate, it gave its residents a sense of safety. Life there was generally predictable. People knew one another, and major events were rare. For this reason, Amstetten was a place no one suspected. At least that was how it appeared from the outside. One of the families living in the town was the Fritzl family. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary Austrian household. The father was known as a disciplined, hard-working, and respectable man. He had a technical profession, a steady job, and was seen by those around him as trustworthy. He greeted his neighbors, went to work each day, and presented the image of a responsible father providing for his family. Inside the home, however, a very different order prevailed. The Fritzl household was quiet. It was a home ruled by strict rules, where obedience was considered normal. The father figure stood at the center of everything. His word was not questioned. The atmosphere inside the house carried a pressure that could not be seen from the outside. The mother lived a silent and compliant life. She avoided conflict and accepted the household order as it was. One of the children who grew up in this home was Elizabeth. She was a quiet, withdrawn girl. She did not stand out at school. Her classmates described her as calm. But Elizabeth's silence was not simply part of her character. The pressure felt inside the home was reflected in her behavior as well. There was always an invisible distance between her and her father. Over time, that distance became more pronounced. As Elizabeth grew older, her father's control began to increase. What she wore, who she spoke to, and where she went were all closely monitored. Even small objections were met with harsh reactions. The home was no longer a safe place for her. At times, she thought about leaving, about running away. She even tried a few times, but each time she was brought back. Running away had not been a solution. It had only tightened the control. During those years, there was an unnoticed activity beneath the house. The father had begun focusing on the basement. He told neighbors it was a storage area, a shelter, or a technical space. The memories of the Cold War were still present, and such structures did not seem unusual to anyone. From time to time, renovation noises were heard, and work was being done in the basement. No one questioned it. There seemed to be nothing worth questioning. For Elizabeth, however, the basement gradually became a source of unease. Her father's interest in that space filled her with a fear she could not explain. She could not put a name to it. She only knew that she wanted to escape. She dreamed of a freer life, a life away from quiet pressure. But those dreams remained trapped within the walls of the house. By the year 1984, Elizabeth was now a young woman. One day her father asked her to help him in the basement. The request sounded ordinary. Some items needed to be moved, and a few cables needed attention. Elizabeth did not object. In that house, objecting had never been easy. She followed her father down into the basement. When the door closed, the sound echoed differently. The noises from the house above suddenly disappeared. In that moment, Elizabeth realized this was not an ordinary request for help. But it was already too late. The door was locked. Behind that door, not only darkness was sealed away, but an unknown stretch of time as well. At that moment, no one knew that this door would not open again for years. Time moved differently in the basement. The distinction between day and night was reduced to the flick of a fluorescent light being turned on and off. There were no windows, no daylight. Everything connected to the outside world existed beyond a few square meters of concrete. For Elizabeth, life was suddenly confined within the boundaries of this narrow space. In the first days, she wanted to believe this was temporary. Perhaps a few days, maybe a short punishment. Her mother was upstairs. Her siblings were upstairs. She believed no one could keep her here for long. But as the days passed, she understood that this hope had no connection to reality. Her father came down to the basement regularly, bringing food, but at the same time, clearly defining the rules of this new life. This space was now her world. The basement was small, airless, and silent. The walls were thick, and sound did not escape. The door was heavy and opened only through a system known to her father. Over time, Elizabeth realized this place had been planned in advance. This was not a sudden decision. It was a structure prepared over a long period of time, and it was built entirely on control. Life in the house above continued as normal. Family meals were shared. Conversations with neighbors took place. Daily routines went on. Elizabeth's absence was explained with a simple story. She had run away. She had left by her own choice. There was even a letter to confirm it. No one questioned the story. Because in that town, no one could imagine such a truth. In the basement, time stretched endlessly. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Elizabeth had to learn how to survive loneliness. She had no one to speak to. Silence became the heaviest burden. Her father's visits meant both fear and the only way to stay alive. The food he brought was insufficient. Sometimes it was stale. Sometimes it was barely enough. But there was no possibility of resistance. Over time, the psychological pressure became heavier than the physical conditions. Her father told her that the outside world was dangerous. He said that no one wanted her, that no one was looking for her. As these words were repeated again and again, they began to settle into her mind. The line between truth and lies blurred. Hope gave way to pure survival instinct. As the years passed, life in the basement changed. Elizabeth was no longer alone. New lives were born in this dark space. The weight of motherhood was placed on her shoulders in the middle of captivity. The children grew up without ever seeing daylight. For them, the world consisted only of concrete walls and the stories their mother told them. Elizabeth chose silence in order to protect her children, because even the smallest act of resistance could make everything worse. In the house above, no one knew about this life. Babies left at the doorstep were seen as strange but explainable. The stories that were told worked for years. People chose acceptance over questioning, because questioning would have meant acknowledging a deeply disturbing possibility. The years spent in the basement began to affect the children's health. Lack of air, insufficient nutrition, and the absence of sunlight left marks on their bodies. Elizabeth did everything she could, but under these conditions, creating miracles was not possible. Still, hope had not completely disappeared. A small, fragile hope that one day something would change. That change came at an unexpected moment. One of the children who had grown up in the basement became seriously ill. Breathing became difficult. Fainting occurred frequently. For Elizabeth, remaining silent was no longer an option. For the first time, this system was seriously shaken, because this time, staying in the basement could mean the end of a life. And this was the beginning of the process that would lead to the opening of a door that had been closed for years. The child who became ill was the first real crack in the silent order of the basement. It was now clear that this world, sealed away for years, could not survive without opening itself to the outside. For the first time, Elizabeth openly stood up to her father. She said that her child needed to be taken to a hospital. It was the clearest demand she had made after years of silence, because this time, it was no longer only about her own life. At first, the request was refused. Excuses were made. As always, time was bought in order to avoid losing control. But as the child's condition worsened, continuing this system became impossible. In the end, a decision was made. The basement door, unseen by anyone for years, was opened. For the first time in many years, Elizabeth stepped upstairs. Her children were with her. Sunlight burned her eyes. The outside world was far louder than she remembered. At the hospital, doctors quickly began to suspect that something was wrong. The child's condition did not match the stories that had been told. The deficiencies in the body clearly indicated long-term confinement in a closed environment. Questions began to be asked. The answers became increasingly inconsistent. When the police became involved, the lies that had been repeated for years no longer worked. At first, Elizabeth did not speak. She had learned to remain silent for years. Fear had become her language. But as the hours passed, she realized that this silence could cost her children their lives. And finally, with a single sentence, she told the truth. She explained who she was, where she had lived, and why she was there. That sentence did not only shatter one family's reality, but woke an entire town and even a country. When the police entered the house, the basement door was opened. What they saw inside confirmed that everything described was real. Narrow corridors, windowless rooms, and the traces of a life hidden away for years. It was a place where time seemed to have stopped. While a normal life had continued above, another world had existed below. The case quickly became national news. People began asking the same question. How was this possible? How had no one noticed for so many years? Neighbors, authorities, society itself. Everyone looked back. The idea that the most horrific truth could be hidden in what appeared to be the safest place was difficult to accept. The court process was long and heavy. Testimonies, reports, and evidence revealed that the system built in the basement was not an accident, but a deliberate plan. The verdict marked a legal end, but it did not erase the weight of what had happened, because this story did not end in a courtroom. For Elizabeth and her children, freedom was a new beginning, but not an easy one. For people who had lived for years in a confined space, the outside world was frightening. The sky, crowds, sounds, everything was a reality that had to be learned again. Life, for them, was starting from zero. This story was not only the exposure of a crime, but also a reminder of what silence can lead to. Sometimes the most terrifying things do not happen with screams, but quietly, and sometimes they remain hidden for years in places where no one chooses to look. When the door was closed, no one thought it would never be opened again. When it finally was, only one question remained. Had nothing truly been noticed, or had no one wanted to look?